Derek Langford didn't just drive cars, he wore them asterisk to the outside world. He was the kind of man who made other men feel small without ever saying a word. His suits were handmade in Milan, his watch was older than most people's careers, and his Arvin Valkyrie GT, parked at a perfect angle outside the Lindsley Modern Art Gallery, wasn't just a car, it was the car. Asterisk worth a staggering $2 million. The Valkyrie was a marvel of aerospace-grade carbon fiber, bleeding-edge aerodynamics, and performance so savage it had to be electronically restrained for civilian use. There were only 5 in North America, and Derek owned one of them. He didn't even need to drive it fast. Just owning it made him a god among the mortals of Manhattan. Asterisk and tonight. Under the warm amber streetlights of 74th and Madison, Derek leaned against the polished limestone exterior of the gallery with a glass of champagne in hand. Watching people stare at the Valkyrie like it was a spaceship that had landed from a richer, more beautiful planet, asterisk, he relished the look's admiration. Envy, raw curiosity. It fed him. Every whispered, "Who is he?" And every jaw that dropped made him feel untouchable. But then she walked in, not into the gallery, no. She didn't belong there, and she didn't pretend to. She approached the Valkyrie like she was searching for something. She was in her late 20s maybe, but age seemed irrelevant with her. She wore faded jeans, splattered with dried paint, a black t-shirt 2 sizes too large, and old sneakers that looked like they'd walked through a war. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, but streaks of blue and hints of gold showed through under the streetlight. She wasn't homeless, but she was definitely out of place. Asterisk, Derek's lips curled upward in an amused, private smile. She hadn't even looked at the gallery, her eyes were fixed on his car. Asterisk people didn't touch it. That was the unspoken rule. You could take photos, pose beside it, even pretend to own it, but no one laid a finger on the Valkyrie until she did. Her fingertips grazed the front edge of the hood, just under the Arvin logo. It wasn't a casual touch, it was deliberate. Like she was feeling for something invisible to the rest of the world. Asterisk Derek straightened up, mildly amused, almost hoping she'd trigger the silent alarm system. Instead, he chuckled loud, careless, a sound that echoed through the small crowd nearby. Asterisk, careful, sweetheart, he called out, sipping from his glass, strolling toward her. That paint job costs more than a semester at Yale. Asterisk, the woman didn't look at him. Her fingers moved from the hood toward the side vent, delicately tracing the curvature. Her eyes weren't filled with wonder. They were filled with ... focus, like she was trying to remember a dream. Asterisk, I mean, don't get me wrong, Derek went on, now just a few feet from her. I love a girl who appreciates fine engineering. But try anything stupid, and I'll have you explaining your life choices to a lawyer. Still nothing. She circled to the rear quarter panel, her hand hovering slightly before finally making contact with the matte-finished spoiler. Her thumb brushed against a sharp edge, and she paused. Asterisk, I'm serious, Derek said, starting to feel that odd tingle of unease behind his collar. Step away from the car. Now, forget soft hazel with flecks of gold and green. Tired but blazing with something like restrained fury, or maybe sadness. He couldn't quite tell. Asterisk, I'm not going to hurt it, she said, her voice calm, low, and clear. I know this one. Asterisk, Derek blinked. You know this one. Asterisk, she nodded once, then pointed to the fender near the front right tire. There's a micro depression just below the paint layer, about the size of a grapeseed. You can't see it, but if you press just right, asterisk, she knelt down before he could stop her. Pressed lightly with 2 fingers, and right there their faintest indentation. No more than 0.5 millimeter appeared. Asterisk, it had been missed during the final, clear coat process. His jaw tightened. How do you know that? He asked, voice no longer teasing. Asterisk, she stood. I made the model. Not the final body, you'd need a whole factory for that. But the master sculpt, the clay prototype. I did the sculpting on the second Valkyrie design team until I quit. Asterisk, you sculpted this. Asterisk, more than sculpted, she said. I breathed this car. Asterisk, the words weren't boastful, they were hollow. Like a truth left too long unsaid. Asterisk, she stepped to the rear again, resting her hand just above the taillight. There's a surface wave in the carbon weave here, barely noticeable, but it never got fixed in time for the show car. Derek was suddenly too aware of the crowd's murmurs fading behind him. I left before the final prototype was approved, she continued. My name's not on the credits. Arvin had deadlines. No time for perfection. Just ... time for market. He felt the champagne glass trembling slightly in his hand. What's your name? He asked. She didn't answer. She took a step back, as if letting go of something heavy. I just wanted to see one in the wild. Once, she said. Before they're all bought up by men who only polish them. It wasn't meant to sting, but it did. He looked at her, hands calloused, rough, speckled with paint and maybe oil. Working hands, not like his ... You really ... made this, he asked, quieter now. I lived it, she said. A silence stretched between them. It wasn't awkward, it was reverent, like something sacred had just been revealed, and no one quite knew how to process it. Then, she reached into her satchel, pulled out a small microfiber cloth. Fingerprint smudge on the driver's side door, her own. Most likely, ... Derek watched, heart pounding for reasons he couldn't name. She moved like a sculptor, like a mother tending to her child, with care so deep it nearly broke him. When she finished, she stepped back once more. I'm done, she said, and turned to leave. Wait, he called after her. But she was, already walking into the Manhattan night, her figure disappearing into a world that had no red carpets for artists who built dreams. He stared after her, a storm of words clashing in his throat. Then he turned to the Valkyrie. It gleamed as it always had. But something had changed. It didn't feel like his anymore, and for the first time in years, Derek Langford, man of machines, money, and masks, stood quietly beside his crown jewel, completely TERRIFYINGLY ... human. Gerald sat in the glass-walled conference room of the same company that had discarded him like obsolete hardware. But now, every pair of eyes on the executive floor was pointed in his direction. Outside the room, assistants whispered and peered in as though witnessing a ghost. Inside, tension thrummed like an overcharged coil. The CTO, Ethan Cross, younger, sharply dressed, and clearly unnerved, sat opposite Gerald watching the black padded case with visible restraint. It was the same prototype they'd once laughed off the table. The very project that could now salvage what remained of Mirotech's teetering credibility. Cross, shifting slightly in his seat, offered a guarded smile and said, "This is unexpected, Gerald." But Gerald was not there for pleasantries. He tapped the case once, firmly. "Not as unexpected as the catastrophic frame failures your drones are about to suffer. I've seen the leaked test data. Those mark the 6th units won't survive. 6 more weeks of field operations. You used my old framework, stripped of safety margins, and now it's collapsing on itself. I built the original math, you built around it. Now it's failing, and I've got the only viable solution left." Cross said nothing for a moment, then leaned forward, fingers interlaced. "I've heard rumors of structural issues, but nothing official." "If you're right, I am right," Gerald cut in, his voice iron in certainty. "Your team cut weight by gutting the reinforcement sublayers. That error leads to stress concentration at load-bearing seams. I ran the same simulations 3 years ago, and I documented exactly what would happen if those cuts were made. The polymer I created, the one you all ignored, was designed for this exact situation. It repairs microfractures in real time, prevents propagation, and can increase flight duration by at least 30% without compromising airframe integrity. You're lucky I finished it." Cross stared at him, processing, then gestured to the case. "Show me." Without another word, Gerald opened the case, revealing the small silver module housed in a protective frame. Beside it, he withdrew a compact demo Riga-reinforced carbon panel, already pre-scored with pressure-sensitive microfractures. He applied the polymer across the surface, activated the mini-stress simulator, and waited. As the room's overhead projector relayed the data feed, it became instantly clear the nanopolymer responded within milliseconds, sealing cracks, distributing thermal buildup, and reinforcing the compromised points even as the simulator increased stress. The curve on the screen flattened, no failure, no fatigue. Cross's mouth opened slightly. That's extraordinary. Gerald tilted his head. It's physics, not magic. You just never let me finish it. Before Cross could respond, the door opened again. 3 board members entered, led by Andrea Whitlock, the head of product oversight, flanked by the company's general counsel, and 2 senior engineers. Cross gave a quick rundown of what they had just witnessed, and Gerald, calm but commanding, ran the demonstration again. The murmurs began almost immediately. One engineer leaned forward, taking photos of the stress results. Andrea's brows were knitted the entire time. "And you say this solves the current drone stability issue?" she asked after the simulation ended. Gerald met her gaze. "It doesn't just solve it, it elevates the platform. It will put your product years ahead of Aerodyne Pulse and prevent a public recall that would destroy your next quarter and tank your defense contract." Her lips tightened. "What's the catch?" Gerald stood straighter, then folded his arms. "I'm not asking for my job back. You've already made it clear what I was worth to you. But this technology, my technology, doesn't come for free. I want a licensing agreement, permanent. I want 15% of every commercial and military application revenue that incorporates the polymer. I want full creative and operational control over a new autonomous division for applied materials research. I want to name it, and I want public acknowledgement. Mirotech's press release will state that my invention resolved the structural crises. You don't get to whitewash me out of the solution after scrubbing me from the company." The room was silent for a beat too long. Then came the objections, first from legal, then from Whitlock herself. "That's an aggressive list of demands," she said coolly. "You're leveraging an emergency." "I'm offering you an escape hatch," Gerald replied, "because in less than a month, your fleet fails, your biggest client walks, and your stock plummets, or you cut me in properly, use the polymer, and turn this disaster into a victory story. Those are your options. You don't have time to develop your own version. You barely even understood the framework you built off of. I did the work, I did the testing, and now I'm offering you the solution, but I set the terms." A second round of heated murmurs followed. Gerald let them debate, his expression unreadable. He didn't flinch when Cross whispered something too legal or when Whitlock stepped outside to make a call, likely to the CEO or perhaps to their lead defense partner. He knew how this went. The math, the pressure, the inevitability all favored him now, because for all their money and power, what they lacked was the very thing they had fired. His mind. An hour passed. 2, he answered questions, showed datasets, walked them through simulated crash tests with and without the polymer. By the end, silence had returned, but it was different this time. Not disbelief, not dismissal. Respect, however grudging. Whitlock finally looked up from her notepad. "We'll draw up the agreement. Full licensing, 15% net on direct implementations, founded control of the new division, and public credit issued in the next shareholder briefing." Gerald nodded once. "Then we have a deal." The next morning, Mirotech's internal bulletin led with an unexpected announcement. Mirotech launches Breakthrough Adaptive Materials Division under direction of returning innovator Gerald Knox. Attached was a brief technical explanation of the polymer solution now being fast-tracked for fleet-wide integration. No mention was made of his firing, no apology either. But the world knew. Within weeks, client confidence soared, defense partners renewed their contracts with extended terms, and stock prices rebounded almost 19%. The polymer was hailed as the most critical advancement in autonomous drone resilience in a decade. Gerald's new Divisionox Materials innovation was staffed with a mix of new talent and hand-picked veterans. He refused corner offices and instead built a lab from scratch inside a converted warehouse 2 blocks from Mirotech HQ. He worked side by side with his engineers. Sometimes late into the night, a man reborn, not through revenge, but through resolve. Former colleagues, who once stayed silent during his firing, now whispered his name with awe. Some tried to apologize. Gerald accepted their words with grace, but never forgot the silence. When journalists asked how he felt about saving the company that discarded him, he only smiled and said, "The work mattered more than the politics. It always did." In truth, Gerald had never felt more free. He was no longer bound by outdated management or frightened executives. He had built something unbreakable not just in the polymer, but in himself. Mirotech, in the end, was not saved by a board decision, or a market pivot, or a PR campaign. It was saved by the quiet engineer they underestimated, who turned rejection into invention and bitterness into brilliance. He didn't need a title anymore. His legacy had already outgrown 1.